British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak defended the government's actions at the time in the public inquiry into the corona pandemic. In his statement, he emphasized that the advice of the scientific advisory group SAGE, that means Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, was followed almost immediately and that there were no chaotic conditions or sudden changes of direction under then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Sunak admitted there had been a heated debate, but he saw it as a positive development. A program that Sunak launched in the summer of 2020 to support the catering industry was particularly criticized. The measure, called Eat Out to Help Out, was intended to encourage people to eat out in restaurants. Opponents accuse him of encouraging the spread of the virus. However, Sunak stated that he was not aware of the particular risks of this measure and could not remember it at the time it was carried out. In view of the high number of deaths in Great Britain, for example, compared to Germany, survivors accused the government of being too hesitant in imposing lockdowns. In total, around 227,000 people died from COVID-19 in the UK, according to death certificates. Sunak began his statement by expressing regret at the deaths and suffering caused by the pandemic and as a result of government actions. He emphasized the importance of learning from these experiences and being better prepared in the future. But British Prime Minister Sunak has to justify his actions in the COVID pandemic, and this brings with it many problems. Uncomfortable questions about his stance during the COVID pandemic, newly rebellious Commons faction, increasing disinterest abroad in British positions, and Brexit populist Nigel Farage in the wings. That's Conservative Prime Minister is fighting on many different fronts at the moment. And there's a lot going on. But there are questions about his time of the pandemic as well, as I said. And was the then finance minister partly responsible for the second wave of infections in autumn 2020 is one of the questions. And the answer is, several witnesses have mentioned this in public hearings of the official COVID-19 investigation in recent weeks. After the first lockdown, Sunak was one of the skeptics of further restrictions. In August 2020, the Treasury Department subsidized the restaurant visits, that's the Eat Out to Help Out I mentioned. And following the 2-week period, COV-2 cases increased between 8 and 17%. To what extent this increase was really due to Sunak's initiative remains an open question, of course. The government's former chief scientific advisor believes this is highly likely, though. A participant in the Scientific Advisory Board's WhatsApp group was so sure that she contemptuously called the finance minister Dr. Death. In his hearing on Monday, Sunak appeared calm, and his role was to provide then Prime Minister Boris Johnson with the best arguments from his department's perspective. That was my constitutional task, he said. The Ministry of Finance encountered the consequences of the various lockdowns with generous support for companies and the self-employed. As the pandemic dragged on, Sunak wanted to counter the intimidation of the population with an optimistic view, as he summarized in the summer of 22. We've tried to say in every proposal, let's stop scaring people. But there are more questions, and one of this is, should Sunak be afraid of his group now? In any case, the Prime Minister faced a much more difficult day on Tuesday, when the second reading about the emergency law introduced into Parliament last week, which is intended to enable the deportation of illegal immigrants to Rwanda, was due. I'm filming before the Parliament session, but you know that Home Secretary Robert Jenrick, a former Sunak loyalist, announced at the weekend that the legislation would not be able to fulfill its purpose. But I do not know the outcome when I'm filming this, unfortunately. But the extent to which this is even possible is a fun topic of debate for lawyers. Politically speaking, the Conservative Prime Minister is in a quandary between the nationalist right-wing part of the party, which would prefer to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, and the Liberal Conservatives, who have already received the text presented goes too far. After all, the government is attempting to ban British courts from advising on individual asylum seekers. The controversial Rwandan regime under President Paul Kagame is quickly declared a safe third country with this, something the Supreme Court saw very differently in November based on the findings from the UN Refugee Convention. If Sunak lost this vote, that would have been an absolutely defeat. But this rarely happens, especially when it comes to a second reading. How much pressure Sunak feels was also made clear by the enormous efforts of the parliamentary group managers, the whips, to get as many MPs as possible to agree to the government line over the weekend. The new Foreign Secretary, former Prime Minister David Cameron, played an important role here. We stand together or we lose the next election is probably appearing in many conversations before that happened. But that didn't stop Downing Street's internal party critics from venting their displeasure publicly. The Tory Civil War is in a full swing again, believes former Finance Minister George Osborne. And there's already talk of a vote of no confidence, like the one Sunak's predecessors Theresa May and Boris Johnson had to endure. And that would be totally crazy, according to General Secretary Richard Holden, pointing to the old adage that the electorate doesn't like divided parties. The Tories are already polling a little more than 20%, or 15 to 20 points behind the opposition Labour Party under Keir Starmer. But another question is, are Sunak's critics seriously talking about a return of Boris Johnson? And what's the deal with Nigel Farage here at the moment? It indeed is what several London media outlets unanimously report. The failed ex-Prime Minister is no longer even a member of the lower house, and recent by-elections have reliably been lost for the governing party. In addition, Johnson, who likes to give highly paid speeches, is doing well in his role as a private citizen and family man, at least what friends claim that. In a very state-supporting manner, Johnson's spokesman says that the former Brexit leader is writing a book and supports the government. Neither one nor the other can be said about the other Brexit propagandists. Nigel Farage, decorated with a bronze medal and a good £1 million richer, has just been released from the jungle camp of the broadcaster ITV. He's already dedicating himself to his favorite pastime again, causing discord among the Conservatives. Of course, the national populace doesn't think the current immigration policy is tough enough. But will he intervene in the election campaign on behalf of the new Reform Party, which is based on UKIP and the Brexit Party? Well, you should never say never, and we will see what role Farage will play here. But that would be another problem for Rishi Sunak. And by the way, Reform Party reminds me of that because that's what's happening the most. No comments that are just campaigning for parties in the comments under my videos. I will just delete them because you can have your opinion about topics, but I will not open my comment section for party campaigning. I cannot vote for any of these parties, and I'll definitely talk about all the parties and what they stand for, but no campaign slogans are allowed in the comments under my videos. And the same goes, of course, for my completely unpolitical channel that you always see on the banner there in recent days. Because if you want to take a rest from all the politics, come and visit me on Outside Views STFC for some Star Trek, and you might find it relaxing. But if you want some more politics, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.